So welcome back to the Soil of Iowa show. My next guest today is who we call JC, but question one, can you please tell the audience your name and why you decided to become a superintendent?
Thank you, Sawyer. Yes, my name for Sawyer and his family is JC. My name is Dr. Joanne Culverhouse. Started my career as a classroom teacher, fourth and fifth grade, and realized that you can have an impact as a teacher with kids. And then so I decided to become a principal because I thought I could impact more kids, and then realized that as a principal, I saw the other opportunities to impact more kids. So I moved from Reno, Nevada down to California and got my doctorate at UCLA, and then went on to become an elementary teacher, an elementary principal, middle school principal, high school principal, and then continuing to see the impact that you could have on kids. And then I moved into an assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum and then human resources, and then finished my year as a superintendent. And as you know, Sawyer, we have had some great conversations about my job. As you know, superintendents are basically interview and are selected by elected board members, either a 5 or a 7-member board of education. And they have one person to interview and hire and fire, and that's the superintendent. So I was hired by the board in 2017 and spent 6 years as the superintendent in La Habra.
Nice, that's super cool. Yeah. So I guess to tell the people out there, do you like being a superintendent?
Oh gosh, Sawyer, I loved being a superintendent. And I loved it because you could see the impact with your decisions, not individually from me as the superintendent, but the team that you built. So we had 7 cabinet members that were in charge of, one was in charge of special education, one was in charge of business, curriculum, technology, HR. And when you build a great team as a superintendent, you can spend time at the schools. Like I would start, because I was in charge of my own calendar, and my only boss were 5 elected officials. So I didn't have anybody watching my daily activity. So I was able to start every single day at a school. And my goal was so that the kids knew me, and I would play tetherball with the kids, even though I would never take on a 5th or 6th grader because they beat me too badly. So I would take on 1st and 2nd graders because they were short enough. But I loved being a superintendent because you make decisions and you're working with a team that really puts the needs of kids first. And so, but it was also probably the most difficult job I've ever had because it's a lot of pressure because everything stops at you. You are the final decision maker, even though you're surrounded by great people.
Nice. Yeah, kind of the boss. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you say that, before you ask your next question, the kids, I don't know, you remember when you're in elementary school, you think that the principal's the boss, like, oh, that's the principal. And the principals, I'd go to the schools and the principals would introduce me as Dr. Culverhouse, and they would say, well, Dr. Culverhouse is my boss. And the kids were like, oh, ooh, you have a boss? So then the kids would refer to me as the boss of the bosses. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, that seems awesome.
Yeah.
Question two, what type of programs did you offer for people with disabilities?
Oh, that's that. I would have to say that the special ed population and what we did for special education students and their families was pretty much over the top because I had a wonderful assistant superintendent. Her name was Dr. Wynn, and she was in charge of the special education program. And she had directors and she had teachers on special assignment, and they would work with the families. So we had pretty typical of other districts. We had a resource at each school. We had a resource teacher. We had special day classes. So many of our students who were impaired were in an SDC classroom. And then we also had 2 ED classroom, emotionally disturbed classes, and those were for our younger kids. And I spent a lot of time in those classrooms reading to the kids because they would earn points to have me come in and spend time with them. And then I would take them out with the aide to play basketball or work with them. So we had pretty much typical programs of resource, special day class, emotionally disturbed classes. They called them ED classes, and I never liked that name, but that was the official handicapping condition on the IEP. So I thought we served our special education students with disability very well.
So for the viewers out there who might not know what an
Oh,
IEP is,
thank you. Yeah, we do that in education. We throw out acronyms all the time. So an IEP is an individualized educational plan. And when a student is tested and they qualify, there has to be a deviation of like, not to get into the details, but has to be a deviation of points between their ability and then they can qualify for a handicapping condition. And then what happens is if they qualify for special education, then the team pulls together, and it's always the team. Teachers are part of that team and parents are part of that team. And many times with our older kids, the students are also part of that team. And what the team would do would put together an individualized educational plan, and they would have specific goals for that student, and they would meet throughout the year, and they would see how the student was progressing to those goals. Another thing that's important to understand for your listeners is you always try in special education to do the least restrictive environment. And what that means for your listeners is if you have a student who is struggling, you're not going to immediately put them into a special education class all day long. You're going to include them into a general education class and then see how they do. So that would be referred to as the least restrictive environment. And that was always the goal, because I believe very strongly in inclusion because it matters. And the special education students that we had that were included in the typical classroom, we found that those students had the most success.
nice, nice, and it obviously makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So will you in on a lot of those planning meetings, or did you have somebody?
That's a great question, Sawyer. When I was a principal, as a principal, you are the administrator in charge. So as a principal, I sat in not on the planning meetings, but I sat in on the IEP and the individual education plan meetings, because every meeting has to have an administrator involved. So as a principal, I think as an elementary principal, if I recall, when I was a principal at Lois Allen Elementary School in Reno, Nevada, I think I sat in on over 300 IEP meetings because you were the only administrator. And then you can also have your psychologist become the administrator in charge, but you always need an administrator at those IEP meetings. As a superintendent, I was not involved in any of those meetings. As a superintendent, the only time I was involved with the special education is when we had a due process hearing when a parent was going to be very unhappy with the results of their child's experience in special education, and they bring a lawsuit against the district. And we had attorneys and then our assistant superintendent. I, along with our assistant superintendent and attorneys, would make the final decision if we were going to settle with the parents. And then all of that had to be approved by our Board of Education. So it's not complicated, but there are definitely checks and balances, and that's always good for kids when there are checks and balances.
Nice, nice. When it comes to the school system, what do you think needs to improve with these programs for kids that could help them be more included or could help them sort of move forward?
Sawyer, that is probably one of the most intelligent questions I have ever been asked, because I have a strong opinion about what would improve the programs, and the programs need funding. special education, to have a high quality program, you have to have funding to meet the needs of the students. And what I mean by that is the special education, you get funded by the state and you get funded by the federal government, and which is kind of scary, not to get into politics, but with the Department of Education, if they're not funding special education, that's a pretty scary thought in my experience and my thoughts. So when I say that the programs need funding, because the state says you get this amount of money, the federal government says you get this amount of money, but there's always, you are always paying out of the general fund to help you can never go apples to apples with what special education costs, because you don't get that much money from the federal or the state. So the district then is funding special education. So an answer to your question very simply is, if you had more funding, you could hire more staff to have the students with disability have one-on-one time with an adult. And I believe very strongly in that, but that's a great question.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything you would like to, before we leave, is there anything you would like to tell the audience that you feel very strongly that could either help people with disabilities or anything about that you just want to say?
First of all, I just want to commend you, Sawyer, for having these type of podcasts and these type of interviews, because I believe that the general public, if you are a parent and you don't have a student who has qualified for special needs, or a student who has a disability, you're not aware of the programs, you're not aware of the opportunities for special needs and students with disability. And I commend you for holding these type of interviews for your listeners to understand what it means to have a student with disabilities. The parents are also emotionally involved because their students need extra care. And a lot of times the parents don't know where to get that. So in closing, when you ask what else I would like to share, it's basically thank you for bringing this topic to your listeners, because I think it's an extremely important topic.
Yeah, thank you as well for being open to participate.
Absolutely. And if I can do anything else to help your message, Sawyer, you please just reach out and ask me, okay?
Right, thank you so much.
All right, you take care.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.